What if I told you that in 1863, 16 years before Edison switched on his first light bulb, the United States launched a combat submarine capable of diving, maneuvering, and sinking a warship? Not a sketch, not a dream. A functioning vessel of iron and precision engineering. Stop. Let that land. The world of 1863 runs on candlelight and horse hooves. Surgeons amputate limbs with whiskey as anesthesia. The most advanced communication technology is a telegraph wire strung between wooden poles. And somewhere in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, a crew of 8 men climbs into a sealed iron tube and vanishes beneath the surface. The H.L. Hunley, 40 feet long, riveted iron hull, hydrodynamically shaped, operational at depth. We're told this was invented, designed and built from scratch by Confederate engineers in a war zone under naval blockade, with no industrial infrastructure, no precision tooling, no reliable steel supply. Sounds inspiring, the kind of story that belongs on a motivational poster. Do you seriously believe this? Let's turn on the calculator and just count. The Confederacy in 1863 documents fewer than 12 functioning iron foundries. 12. The entire industrial output of the Confederate States couldn't produce a reliable railroad rail without foreign import. And yet, we're expected to accept that these same foundries produced a pressure-sealed, hydrodynamically optimized submersible hull with riveting tolerances tight enough to hold water at 5 meters of depth. That's like finding a functional jet engine in a blacksmith's workshop. The object exists. The production base doesn't. Either the Confederacy possessed industrial capabilities that have been entirely erased from the historical record, or the Hunley was not built in 1863. There is no third option. And here's where your skin starts to go cold, because we haven't even touched the oxygen problem yet. 8 men, sealed tube, hand cranking a propeller for hours. We'll do that calculation, and the numbers will not be kind to the official version. We see a photograph. We see a vessel. We see a date stamped confidently in every history textbook. What we don't see, what no one has ever shown us, is the factory that built it. Remember that detail. Remember the missing factory. Because when we reach the metallographic report, the one that was never published, the one a researcher left with her attorney before her passing in 2005, you will understand why that factory doesn't appear in the records. It couldn't. It didn't exist in 1863. Let's go. Shift your gaze from the missing factory to the hull itself, because the moment you look closely, really look, the official version doesn't just crack, it collapses. Here is a verifiable fact. The Hunley's hull is not a cylinder, it is a compound curve, an elongated elliptical cross-section tapering at both ends with hydrodynamic precision. To form iron plate into that geometry, you need an industrial hydraulic press generating no less than 800 tons of force. Not 80, not 200, 800 tons. How many hydraulic presses of that capacity existed in the entire Confederacy in 1863? 0. We're told Confederate engineers bent and shaped the hull plates by hand, heating iron in furnaces, hammering curves into shape over hand-built forms. That's the official story. The most interesting part is just beginning. Write in the comments what city you're from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. The tension is rising. Who's watching us from where? Drop a like and subscribe to the channel. There's more to come. Mark yourselves in the comments. Which country are you from? Hit that like button and subscribe. The plot thickens. Let's check our geography. Right where you are right now. Smash that thumbs up and subscribe. We're just warming up. Tell us, where are you watching from? Support the video with a like and hit that subscribe button. The climax is near. Share what corner of the world you're in right now. Drop a like and make sure to subscribe. Things are developing rapidly. Write your city in the chat, slam that like, and hit subscribe so you don't get lost. All the juiciest stuff is ahead. Let's get acquainted. Who's from where? Hit like and subscribe right now. The intrigue is building. Write where you're watching this episode from and reward us with a like and subscription. Emotions are off the charts. Quickly write what city you're from, drop a fat like and subscribe to the channel. Sounds rugged. Heroic even, but let's count. A single curved hull plate for the Hunley spans roughly 4 feet in length and must maintain a tolerance, a maximum deviation from the designed curve, of less than 3 millimeters across its entire surface. Otherwise, the riveted seams leak. At 5 meters of depth, a leaking seam doesn't inconvenience you. It ends you. 3 millimeters, achieved by hand, with hammers and fire. That is like asking a blacksmith to hand forge a component for a Swiss watch. The skill gap isn't large. It is a different category of civilization entirely, and the rivets themselves. Each rivet hole must align across 2 curved plates simultaneously, plates that were shaped separately on different days by different hands. The tolerance for misalignment that still permits a watertight seal under 1 millimeter. The Hunley had over 200 structural rivets, each one hitting that tolerance. Do you really think that happened in a Confederate ironworks under wartime conditions in 1863? Either the hull was shaped by machinery that has been scrubbed from every historical record of Southern industry, or it arrived already formed, and someone installed the interior fittings afterward. There is no third option. Here's the analogy that keeps engineers awake at night. Finding the Hunley's hull in 1863 Confederate America is like discovering a flawlessly machined titanium aircraft fuselage in a medieval forge. You can bolt wooden benches inside it, you can attach ropes to it, you can call yourself the inventor, but you didn't make the shell. You just moved into it. This is not a construction anomaly. This is evidence that something is catastrophically wrong with the story we've been told, but the hull geometry, that's merely the surface. What was happening inside that sealed tube? That calculation will shake you. Let's return to the crew. Let's calculate exactly what happened to those 8 men the moment that hatch sealed shut. The Hunley's interior volume? Approximately 4.2 cubic meters of breathable air. That's not an estimate. That's a documented measurement from the 2000 recovery. 8 men, hand cranking a propeller under sustained physical exertion, each man consuming roughly 2.5 liters of oxygen per minute during moderate labor. Do the math. The total oxygen available at dive, around 882 liters, 8 men burning through 20 liters per minute combined. That gives you 44 minutes before oxygen drops to a level where judgment fails, not perishes, fails. Confusion, weakness, impaired coordination, before a single man loses consciousness. 44 minutes. We're told the Hunley conducted multi-hour missions. The documented approach to the USS Housatonic on February 17, 1864, from departure to confirmed attack, took over 2 hours. Historians acknowledge this. They then explain it with words like, "they managed" and "remarkably resilient." Do you seriously believe that? Either those 8 men operated under conditions that violated basic human physiology, or something was cycling that air. One of those options requires a miracle. The other requires technology. Now here is where the hair on your arm stands up, because the Hunley is not the only vessel with this problem. The USS Alligator, the Union submarine launched in 1862, 1 year earlier, was documented as carrying a chemical air purification system, an internal apparatus that scrubbed exhaled gases and recycled breathable air in a closed loop. Pause on that. Closed-loop life support in 1862, the same engineering principle that NASA spent decades developing for spacecraft, the same system that didn't become reliable standard technology until the mid-20th century. We're told a Philadelphia engineer named Brutus de Villeroi designed it from scratch, one man with 19th century chemistry, producing a closed-loop atmospheric system that space agencies would later dedicate billions of dollars and entire research divisions to solving. That's not genius. That's not even possible. It's like a medieval peasant casually sketching a functional microprocessor. Not the concept, not the dream, but the working schematic with correct tolerances that engineers 600 years later would verify as accurate. This is not an inconsistency. This is a pattern. 2 submarines, 2 sides of the same war, the same impossible life support problem, solved with technology that shouldn't exist for another 100 years. Remember that word, pattern. We'll return to it. And when we do, the picture that forms will not be comfortable. The scariest part isn't even the air, it's what was lighting the inside of these vessels underwater. Look at the portholes. 3 of them set into the forward conning tower of the Hunley, small, circular, precision-fitted glass ports sealed against water pressure at operational depth. Now ask yourself one question. What were they for underwater in 1863 in complete darkness, 3 viewing ports, and no documented light source capable of illuminating anything beyond them? Candles consume oxygen that 8 men cannot spare. Kerosene lanterns produce heat and fumes in an already sealed atmosphere. Neither produces light visible through a submerged porthole from outside the vessel. So who was looking out, and at what? I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking navigation, internal use. Looking at gauges, checking the crew, fine. Except multiple eyewitness accounts from Confederate harbor observers, documented in the official records of the War of the Rebellion, Volume 28, describe seeing a blue luminescence emanating from the Hunley's portholes during night dive trials. Blue, steady, not flickering. No candle produces blue light. No kerosene flame produces blue light. No chemical reaction available to 1,863 engineers produces a steady, unflickering blue glow that projects visibly through submerged glass into open water. How is this possible? The official response, when historians engage with this at all, is that the accounts were confused, exaggerated, or mistaken. Observers in the dark, misidentified reflected moonlight, bioluminescence in the harbor water, or simply invented details. Seriously? Multiple independent observers, different nights, same description, same color, same steadiness. Either every witness was simultaneously wrong in the same specific way, or something inside that vessel was producing light that 1863 had no business producing. There is no middle ground. Here is the analogy that ends every debate when I raise this with engineers. A steady blue electrical light requires a power source, a conductor, and a sealed element. The fundamental triad of electric illumination that Edison would patent 16 years later in 1879. Finding a steady blue light source inside the Hunley in 1863 is like finding a working LED embedded in a Viking longship. The object functions, the civilization that made it doesn't match. Now let's layer this onto everything we've already established. A hull no Confederate press could form, an air system no 19th century chemist could design. And now a light source that Edison hadn't invented yet. We're not looking at engineering ingenuity. We're looking at a vessel that arrived with capabilities already installed, capabilities that the men who operated it neither understood nor could replicate. Remember this detail. The light, we return to it at the end. And when we do, the explanation will not come from any history textbook. And here we approach the most unsettling part of this investigation, because the Hunley is not the anomaly. The Hunley is just the one we can see. Zoom out. Pull back from Charleston Harbor. Look at the full map. The American Civil War produced not one impossible submarine. It produced a fleet of them, both sides, simultaneously, in a nation that, by every documented industrial metric, could not manufacture a single one. Take the USS Intelligent Whale. Union submarine constructed between 1863 and 1866, now sitting in the National Guard Militia Museum in New Jersey. You can visit it today. The official version states it was designed by engineer Augustus Price and built by the firm Alligator Associates. Look at its hull. The Intelligent Whale's exterior is a smooth, continuous curve, a perfect prolate spheroid, tapered at both ends with hydrodynamic symmetry that modern naval architects describe in their own published papers as remarkably refined. No excess seams, no compensation welds, no geometric irregularities from manual shaping. Do you feel the dissonance yet? Manual metalworking, and the only method available in 1863, produces detectable irregularities always. This is not opinion, this is physics. When human hands shape metal over hand-built forms, microscopic surface deviation accumulates. Modern laser measurement of hand-worked 19th century iron vessels shows deviation of 8 to 12 millimeters across comparable surfaces. The intelligent whale's hull deviation, under 2 millimeters across its entire surface, that is a CNC machined tolerance. Applied to a vessel built, we are told, by hand in a New Jersey workshop during wartime in 1863. Either the laws of physics suspended themselves for Augustus Price, or someone is lying about who made this hull. There is no third option. Here's the analogy that makes engineers go quiet in meetings. Achieving that surface consistency by hand in 1863 is like asking a medieval stonemason to carve a perfect optical lens. Not approximately round, not close enough. Interferometrically verified. Correct to the wavelength of light. It's not about skill level. It's about the category of tool required. The tool didn't exist. The result exists anyway. We see an impossible hull in Charleston. We see an impossible hull in New Jersey. We see the same impossibility, same tolerances, same geometry, same unanswerable production question on both sides of the same war. This is not isolated genius. This is a pattern. And patterns have sources. Ask yourself, if both sides of a war possess technology, neither side can manufacture where did it come from? The answer is ahead, and it will reframe everything we've covered so far. Now pull the lens back even further, past the Civil War, past 1863, all the way back to 1776. Because the pattern doesn't start with the Hunley. The pattern starts with a vessel called the Turtle. The Turtle was the first submarine used in combat in American history, deployed during the Revolutionary War nearly 90 years before the Hunley. Designed, we are told, by a Connecticut farmer named David Bushnell, one man, no engineering degree, no institutional support, no industrial infrastructure of any kind, and yet the Turtle achieved neutral buoyancy through a hand-operated ballast system, a foot-controlled water intake valve that allowed the pilot to descend or ascend by adjusting internal water weight with precision. This requires a pressure-sealed hull, a mechanically reliable valve system operable under external water pressure, and ballast calculations accurate enough to achieve neutral buoyancy within inches of a target depth. How does a Connecticut farmer derive those calculations? In 1775, the hydrodynamic principles required to compute neutral buoyancy for an irregularly shaped submerged vessel weren't formally published until Leonhard Euler's work, and even then, applying those principles to a working physical vessel required iterative testing with precision instrumentation that 1775 simply did not possess. Do you seriously believe David Bushnell worked this out alone, with paper and a quill on a farm in Connecticut? The official version asks us to accept exactly that. One farmer, zero engineering precedent, a functioning submarine in 1775. It's like telling us a medieval peasant accidentally derived quantum field equations while plowing. Not approximately, not partially, correctly. With working results. Either David Bushnell was operating on knowledge that came from somewhere outside his documented experience, or the Turtle, like the Hunley, was not designed from scratch. Now here is the detail that should make the ground shift beneath you. The Turtle's hull was constructed from oak, 2 carved wooden halves sealed together. Historians praise this as ingenious improvisation, but the sealing compound used between those halves has never been satisfactorily identified. Contemporary accounts describe it as neither tar nor pitch, nor any standard caulking material of the era. It was described as quote, _3 __ that remained perfectly watertight under sustained pressure. Unknown composition, 1775. Perfectly watertight. We're told this detail is a minor historical footnote. It is not a footnote, it is a signature. We see an impossible submarine in 1863. We see an impossible submarine in 1776. We see the same impossibilities, different centuries, different materials, identical engineering logic. This is not coincidence, this is inheritance. But from whom? That answer requires us to look at what all these vessels had in common. and what was done to them afterward. What did they all have in common? Let's lay them side by side and look. The turtle, 1776. The alligator, 1862. The Hunley, 1863. The intelligent whale, 1863. 4 vessels, 2 wars, nearly 90 years apart, all sharing the same category of engineering impossibility. Hulls that exceed their era's production capacity, sealing systems of unknown or unverifiable composition, life support logic that belongs to a different century entirely. And here is what was done to every single one of them afterward. The turtle, lost. Officially destroyed or sunk during the British capture of Fort Lee in 1776. No wreckage recovered, no components preserved, gone. The alligator officially sunk in a storm off Cape Hatteras in April 1863 while under tow. The Navy cut the tow line deliberately during a storm, and we are expected to accept that the most advanced submarine in American naval history, a vessel with a functioning closed-loop air system, was simply abandoned to the ocean floor rather than recovered and studied. Do you really think that? The Hunley rested on the seafloor for 136 years before recovery in 2000. The intelligent whale, decommissioned in 1872, passed between storage facilities for decades, studied by no serious naval engineering institution during the entire period of active submarine development. We're told these are the natural fates of experimental wartime vessels. Accidents happen, wars are chaotic, equipment is lost. But look at the pattern. Every vessel that represented an engineering impossibility was either destroyed, deliberately abandoned, or rendered inaccessible before the era of systematic metallurgical analysis. Every single one. Not 3 out of 4, not most of them, all of them. Either this is the most catastrophic streak of bad luck in naval history, or someone was managing what could and could not be examined. There is no third option. Here is the cargo cult analogy, and I want you to hold it because we will return to it. Imagine Pacific Islanders in 1945 finding an abandoned American airfield. They clear the runway. They build wooden control towers. They fashion headsets from coconut shells. They perform the rituals of aviation without understanding the principles. The planes don't come, but the runway is real. That is precisely what we see in 1863. Men installing hand cranks into vessels whose original propulsion they could not comprehend, replacing precision systems with muscle power, performing the ritual of submarine warfare inside machines they did not build and could not replicate. The original propulsion, that phrase will matter enormously in what comes next. Because when the Hunley was finally raised from the seafloor in 2000, investigators found something inside the propulsion cavity that has never been publicly explained. Let's return to the propulsion cavity. Let's look at exactly what the 2000 recovery team found and what they didn't say about it. The hand crank mechanism installed in the Hunley's interior was mounted on a shaft running the length of the vessel, turned by 8 men seated in a row. This is documented. This is in every textbook. What is not in every textbook is the shape of the mounting brackets that held that shaft in place. The brackets don't match the shaft. The mounting points, the structural recesses machined into the hull's interior frame, are shaped for a different mechanism entirely. The hand crank shaft was adapted to fit them, bolted into cavities clearly designed for something else, with gap-filling metalwork that any restoration engineer can identify as secondary installation. The original mounting geometry is still visible beneath. Who in their right mind machines precision mounting brackets for a hand crank shaft and then installs a hand crank shaft that doesn't fit them? Nobody. Because those brackets weren't made for a hand crank shaft. Something else was there first. Something was removed before the vessel entered Confederate service. And here is the detail that makes this thought impossible to dismiss. The original mounting cavities show no corrosion, no oxidation. Clean metal, and as if the removal happened recently before the vessel was pressed into service in 1863, not centuries earlier. Clean, unoxidized, in an iron vessel. Iron oxidizes on contact with atmosphere. The interior of the Hunley, when raised after 136 years on the seafloor, showed expected corrosion on every documented 1863-era component. The hand crank shaft, corroded. The ballast fittings corroded. The crew benches deteriorated entirely. The original mounting cavities clean. Either those cavities were sealed against atmosphere by a material or method we cannot identify, or the removal of the original mechanism happened under conditions that left no oxidative trace, which means conditions we cannot explain with 1863 chemistry. There is no third option. Here is the analogy that ends conversations. Finding clean, unoxidized mounting points inside a 136-year-old iron wreck is like opening a pharaoh's tomb and discovering a stainless steel bracket among the limestone. The tomb is ancient. The bracket doesn't age. Those two facts cannot coexist unless something about the bracket is fundamentally different from everything around it. Something was in that vessel, something was removed, and whatever removed it understood materials and atmospheric chemistry at a level that 1863, or frankly 2000, struggles to fully account for. But the scariest part isn't the cavity. The scariest part is the crew found sitting inside it, still at their stations, perfectly still, and that stillness is the most disturbing engineering mystery of all. 8 men, seated at their stations, hands near their posts, no clustering at the hatch, no evidence of any movement toward the exit. This is not interpretation. This is the documented physical position of the crew as recovered in 2000, verified by the Hunley Commission and published in their official findings. 8 men in an emergency made no attempt to escape. Now let's talk about what the human body does when it faces suffocation or flooding in a sealed space. It panics, not as a choice, as a biological reflex. Oxygen deprivation triggers involuntary motor responses within 60 to 90 seconds of critical threshold. Disorientation, desperate movement toward any exit, physical struggle, flooding triggers an even faster response. The body moves, always. This is not psychology. This is not bravery overriding instinct. This is the oldest survival mechanism in vertebrate biology. It cannot be voluntarily suppressed by 8 men simultaneously. And yet, none of them moved. We're told the crew was overcome too rapidly by flooding or suffocation to react. But let's count. The Hunley's hatch was 14 inches in diameter, located less than 4 feet from the nearest crew position. Even in total darkness, a panicking man can locate and attempt a hatch in under 10 seconds. Suffocation does not reach critical threshold for at least 60 seconds. Enough time for instinctive movement toward exit. 8 men, 14-inch hatch, 60 seconds minimum, 0 movement. Do you feel what this means? Either 8 men simultaneously chose perfect stillness in the face of a slow end, or the end was not slow, or it was not suffocation at all. There is no third option. Something rendered 8 human beings instantaneously immobile at their stations, not gradually, not sequentially, one by one as oxygen depleted, simultaneously, in the same moment, with no survival response whatsoever. This thought makes you cold. It should, because we have now arrived at the only explanation the evidence actually supports, the one that closes every open loop we've built across this entire investigation. Remember the clean mounting cavity where something was removed. Remember the blue light no 1863 technology could produce. Remember the air system that belongs to the space age. Now add 8 men who didn't move. The original mechanism, yet whatever occupied those mounting brackets before the hand crank was installed, was still partially present, not removed entirely, dormant, and on the night of February 17, 1864, something triggered it one final time. Not a flood, not suffocation, the machine's own original system, Sidas, discharging for the last time inside a vessel full of men who had no idea what they were sitting in. The metallographic report confirms what this mechanism was made of, and that report was never meant to be published. Now let's look at the report, the one that was never published, the one that a researcher left with her attorney in 2004 with instructions to release it 20 years after her passing in 2005. The document exists. It is a metallographic analysis of hull samples taken from the Hunley during the conservation process at the Warren Lash Conservation Center in North Charleston. Samples were extracted from 3 locations: the forward hull plate, the conning tower frame, and, critically, The interior mounting cavity walls, the same cavities with no oxidation that we established in Part 8. The findings on the hull steel itself were already extraordinary. Zero sulfur content, near zero phosphorus. These are the two signature contaminants of 19th century iron smelting, produced inevitably by charcoal or coke-based furnace processes. Every documented sample of Civil War-era American steel carries both. You cannot smelt iron with 19th century methods and avoid them. It is chemically impossible. The Hunley's hull steel carries neither. How is this possible? Removing sulfur and phosphorus from steel to this degree requires either electric arc furnace technology, developed in 1907, or a vacuum induction process not standardized until the 1950s. We're talking about steel purity levels that American military specifications didn't routinely achieve until after World War II. Let's count what this means. The Hunley's hull contains steel that requires technology 44 years ahead of its supposed construction date at minimum, more likely 90 years ahead. That gap is not an anomaly. That gap is a chasm. Finding this steel in an 1863 vessel is like carbon dating a medieval manuscript and getting a result of 400 BC. The numbers don't just conflict, they obliterate the official timeline entirely. Do you seriously believe this steel was smelted in a Confederate foundry? Either the laws of chemistry were different in 1863 South Carolina, or this steel was not made in 1863 South Carolina. There is no third option, but the mounting cavity samples, those are where the report becomes something else entirely. The metal lining the original mounting cavities shows a crystalline grain structure uniform at the molecular level. Not approximately uniform, not uniform within normal industrial tolerances, uniform in a way that current materials science associates with only one production method, controlled solidification under electromagnetic field alignment. That technology exists today in advanced aerospace manufacturing. In 2004, it was experimental. In 1863, it was not imagined by anyone. The researcher who wrote this report understood exactly what she had found. She spent 1 year after completing it without publishing a word. Then she left it with her attorney. She knew what publishing it would mean, and she knew who would prefer that it never surfaced. That brings us to the question of the Civil War itself and what it was actually clearing away. Look at a map of the Civil War's most devastated cities, not the battlefields, the cities. Richmond, Virginia. Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia. These were not random targets. These were the three urban centers with the highest documented concentration of anomalous pre-war architecture, buildings whose construction records don't exist, whose foundational engineering exceeds documented 1850s capability, and whose destruction was pursued with a systematic thoroughness that went far beyond military necessity. Atlanta was not defeated. Atlanta was erased. Sherman's march to the sea in 1864 destroyed not just military infrastructure, but every foundry, every machine shop, every dry dock facility within a 60-mile corridor. We're told this was standard scorched earth strategy. Deny resources to the enemy. Fine. But let's count what was actually destroyed. In Atlanta alone, Union forces demolished 4,000 structures in November 1864. 4,000. The city's entire industrial base, gone in 3 weeks. Historians call this __quote, _5, But look at the specific targets. The rail facilities destroyed. The foundries destroyed. The dry docks along the Chattahoochee River, facilities capable of housing and servicing underwater vessels, destroyed first, before anything else. Who in their right mind prioritizes river dry docks over a rail hub in a land war? Someone who understood what those dry docks contained or what they were capable of concealing. We're told the Civil War was fought over ideology and economics. That explanation has always been taught to us as complete. But here is the chain that the evidence actually produces. Impossible vessels appear on both sides simultaneously, vessels requiring technology 90 years ahead of schedule. The war destroys every facility capable of servicing or reverse engineering those vessels. By 1870, the era of recoverable artifacts ends. Coal and steam, technologies humanity actually understood, become the foundation of the industrial age. Either the destruction of these facilities was coincidental collateral damage, or it was the entire point. There is no third option. Here is the analogy that closes this loop permanently. The Civil War functioned like a controlled demolition of an antique library, fought with rifles and cannon on the surface, while underneath the actual objective was the systematic elimination of infrastructure that preserved knowledge nobody wanted examined. The ideology was the cover story. The submarines were the secret. We see impossible steel, we see erased facilities, we see vessels that vanished before analysis was possible. We see a war whose destruction pattern maps precisely onto the locations of anomalous technology. The picture is complete. Every loop we opened across this investigation closes in the same place. The submarines were found, not built. And the war ensured that question could never be officially asked. Until now. Go back to the beginning. A present-day submarine engineer staring at a blueprint of the Hunley. 20 years of experience, no agenda, no theory to defend. She says quietly, "We couldn't build this today, not with these tolerances, not with these materials, not in a war zone." She is not a conspiracist. She is a professional reading a technical document and telling us what it says. And what it says is that the object in Charleston Harbor in 1863 should not exist. We started with one photograph, one vessel, one impossible date, and then we counted. We calculated hull tolerances that exceed Confederate industrial capacity by every documented metric. We measured oxygen consumption that renders multi-hour missions physiologically impossible without systems belonging to a different century. We identified light sources that Edison wouldn't patent for 16 more years. We traced the same impossibilities backward through time to 1776, a different war, a different vessel, the same unanswerable engineering signature. We found steel that cannot be smelted without technology developed 90 years later. We found 8 men who didn't move. We found a war that destroyed, with surgical precision, every facility capable of asking the questions we are asking right now. Either all of this is coincidence or none of it is. We know which answer the evidence supports. Here is the question that remains, the one no document, no report, no metallographic analysis can close. If these vessels were found in silted harbors and sealed dry docks, recovered artifacts of something that came before, what else is still down there? What did they find and choose to use? What did they find and choose to destroy? And what did they find, understand completely, and decide that humanity was not ready to know? That last question should stay with you. It should follow you the next time you stand in front of the Hunley in its conservation tank in North Charleston and watch the light play across that impossible hull. The tour guide will tell you about Confederate ingenuity and wartime innovation. You will know what the tour guide doesn't mention. We are waking up. We are learning to ask the questions that the official version was designed to make unnecessary. We are counting, we are calculating, we are refusing to accept quote 7 as an answer to an engineering impossibility. This investigation is not finished. It has barely begun. If you want to keep going, subscribe, because what we uncover next makes the Hunley look like a footnote. The submarines were just the surface. What's beneath it changes everything.